This is a vintage Hasbro WWF Ultimate Warrior figure from the early 90s. And this is a slightly larger version of that same figure. Today I'll be showing you how you can 3D print your own giant figure, and I'll explain how you can sand it and paint it to make it look just like this one right here. The first thing we'll need is a 3D model file, and fortunately for us, there are plenty of those available on the internet. If you go to a 3D model search engine like Yegi.com and search for Hasbro WWF, you'll find tons of different figures to choose from. There are several different creators that post these 3D model files, and the one that I got was from an account named Desert-Octopus on cults3d.com. This file was broken up into 4 pieces: the upper body, the lower body, and the left and right arms. You can technically print this model at any size you want. I decided to go with 400%, making the final figure stand about 18 inches tall, which seems like a pretty good size. I noticed that certain parts like the legs would require a lot of additional support material if I printed them in one piece. So in an attempt to save a bit of money and time, I decided to cut some of the parts into a few smaller pieces which I could later glue together. If you don't mind printing all the extra support material, you can always just print it in one piece. So I generated the G-code files in Cura, my slicing program, and then copied them over to my 3D printer to print them out one by one. The machine I'm using today is the Creality Ender 3 Max. One thing to note is that I switched out the standard 0.4mm nozzle with a 0.6mm nozzle. And this was one of the best little 3D printing hacks that I've done because you get good quality prints, but they print substantially faster. Generally, by doing this, I've cut down my print time by about a third. So these are all the pieces that I ended up with after printing. Overall, they look pretty good, and you could technically start painting them right away if you wanted to, but there are some areas that have some noticeable filament lines or rough spots, so I decided to sand them down to make the surface a bit smoother. I have a few different types of sanding tools and sandpaper with different grit values. You can go with a more coarse sandpaper for the rougher areas, and a finer sandpaper for the smaller filament lines. After the initial sanding, it was time to apply some glazing and spot putty to smoothen the surface even more. You can apply it wherever you want. I pretty much put it all over the whole figure, and then I let it sit for a while to dry. Once it was ready, I did some more sanding to smooth out any little clumps in the putty that I could see. Next, it was time to apply some filler primer. This does a bit more filling in of the small dips on the surface, and it prepares the object to be painted. At this point, you might see some small imperfections that you didn't notice before, so you can choose to repeat the sanding and priming process a few more times if you wish. It's up to you, depending on the level of smoothness that you're after. Now, when it comes to painting, ideally I'd want to use an airbrush or some kind of spray cans to get the smoothest paint job possible, but I didn't have access to that, so I just did everything with a paintbrush. I used cheap acrylic paints, mixing and matching different brands. You can get these from stores like Walmart, Michael's, or even the dollar store. I started off with a base layer. This is very sloppy. I'm not really worried about painting perfectly in the lines. I'm just laying down a foundation of color. I let each layer dry, and then I applied more layers to make the color more saturated. You have to be pretty patient because each layer of paint takes a while to dry. I did about 4 layers for the base. Now, it was at this point that I realized that I had made a small mistake. I forgot to glue the parts together that I had initially split up. This is something that I should have done before priming and painting, but not to worry, we can still fix the problem fairly easily. I filled in the gaps with some more glazing and spot putty, and then sanded it down before painting over it. Next, I began adding some of the other colors, the green and the reddish orange. Again, it's still a little bit sloppy at this point, but we'll slowly refine the paint job and add all the little details until everything is complete. When the painting was done, I added a final layer of gloss coating to protect the paint job and give the figure a shiny finish, just like the original vintage toy. These are all the finished pieces right here. Now it was just a matter of sticking the parts together. It took a little bit of pressure to get the arms and the torso in, but I managed to do it, and here is the finished product. It stands right around 18 inches tall. Here's a look at the articulation. You can rotate the torso, and move the arms up and down as well. Leave me a comment and let me know what else you'd like to see me make. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.